Hey y'all. This is a special edition of the Stories That Sparkle podcast, and I'm doing my little intro while I'm walking because I'm a big walker. Anyone who's been around here who knows me knows that about me. So I thought it was fitting to just do my intro this way. I'm doing a special episode. It's video because I'm recapping at a very high level the Discoball tour. More about that in a second. And have some updates, so it's about what's next for the podcast. I have resisted video podcast for a while, and there's a few reasons for that, which I'll get into in a second. But in the meantime, while I catch my breath, just sit back, relax, take a deep breath. Let's all do that together and listen in / watch along. All right. Mwah.
I'm Hella Rader. With a good sense of humor, an open heart, and an open mind, I love to explore the very human complexities in others and in myself. That's why I created a space for women you have never heard of and could easily pass on the street to share in their own voices the intricacies of starting over in life, building community, inhabiting their bodies, and more. Welcome to our Discoball, the stories that sparkle.
Hey there. Welcome to the Stories That Sparkle podcast, video edition. What? I'm doing this special episode. I don't normally do video for the podcast, even though I know that, video podcasts are the thing, and the way that, really that's where it's going. That's where it's been going, because everything is television now. But there's a few reasons why I don't typically do video podcasts, primarily to maintain the safety and comfort of the women that join me on the podcast, because this podcast is all about creating a space for women to share the intricacies of their stories. Some of them are incredibly personal stories, difficult times in their lives, lots of hope in there, and getting through and coming out of. But they're sensitive topics. Some of my guests have been survivors, and some of them are more or less comfortable with their names and faces being associated with that. Also, it's hard enough, quite frankly, I know this from personal experience since starting this podcast, to record and hear your own voice in this kind of way. So just the audio only format can be hard enough as it is. So once you add video to that, the level of vulnerability and feeling of exposure just gets amplified, which I learned again myself when I was doing my docu-series of the Discoball tour, which I'll explain for those that are new here in a second what that is. And just having my face, my voice, and my story all combined into one was a lot more difficult than I realized when I shot the footage. But then when I was editing it and putting it out there, I just was like, I'm not ready for that. So that's a big reason why I don't typically do video podcasting. That may change or evolve over time, as everything else has here. But for right now, I'm sticking to that. But I did want to do this special edition as a video podcast, mostly because I wanted to push myself a little bit further into this universe. I don't have all the technology worked out for that, so the audio quality is not where I'd like it to be for this, if you're an audio-only listener especially. So bear with me and thank you for your patience. But I just was like, I can't also figure out the tech side. I just want to do it. And this is a pattern for me in a good way, I think, of I get an idea, I see the vision, and I just want to do it and figure out then how to get better at doing it or working out the details. But sometimes for me, just doing it and literally like popping the seal or ripping the Band-Aid off, whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor you want to use, is important to just have done it. So I thought I would push myself and do something different, because This is a bit of a turning point for the Stories That Sparkle podcast. Yeah, I know. We're not even a year into this thing, and I'm already pivoting ever so slightly in a big way. Ah! But no, seriously, not that that wasn't serious, but I am pivoting the podcast, and I'll talk about where it's going and what I see for it next towards the end of this. But before I pivot, I wanted to just do a quick recap of the Disco Ball tour. And again, for those who are new here, that is a 30-day driving tour that I did last September, September 2025, from Virginia all the way west through the south to Denver, Colorado, and then back through the Midwest. So during that trip, 30 days, almost 5,000 miles, excuse me, I recorded. This is the problem with video. You can't, I can't, I mean, I could edit that out, but like that's going to be weird. Anyway, during that 30 days, I recorded 18 different women's stories. I went to their homes, sat with them in their happy place inside of their home, oftentimes met their family members, children, significant others, their pets. And yeah, I really encouraged them to tell me where they wanted to sit in their home, in their happy place within their home to record these conversations. Because that's what I did when I started this podcast. Now I kind of record all over the place in different locations. But at the time when I started, I did it in my happy place, my sunroom. So it felt important to do it in other people's sunrooms or their equivalents. So anyway, also just to give a little context for where I was at when I started the Disco Ball tour, I left August 30th, I believe it was it was a Saturday. The morning I left, I got a call from my niece in Germany that my oldest brother, they all live in Germany, that part of the family, had suffered a massive heart attack. So as I'm about to embark on this extremely long adventure, exciting time, I was also fully aware that my oldest brother, who I'm very close to, was in the hospital, and I had no idea how that was going to turn out. So he's fine, and there's parts of that that show up on my Disco Ball docu-series, which is a video documentary type thing that I made. I shot all the footage myself along the way. So more about that later. But in any case, I got that news the morning I left. So that was a lot to take in. Um, Grateful that he's okay. And also, I was coming back from a trip with the man I'm in a relationship with right now, and it was taking a different turn in a good way. Like there was some serious conversations happening there that are ongoing to this day, but some big changes were happening in that universe as well. So as I'm driving off, there's all this going on back home and in another country. So there's a lot happening around what I was doing. So I learned from writing my memoir that it's good to give some space and time to big things, to process them a bit and let them settle before talking about them. And I'm sure I know I have way more to unpack about all that came up during the Disco Ball tour. This is not by any means an exhaustive, extensive, detailed deep dive into that. This is just a high level overview of my key takeaways from that tour and also some key themes that came up for me through my different conversations, but also around those recordings, time I was spending with people in person, some of them I hadn't seen for a really long time. And I made a list at one point of all the guests I had, and I've known them between almost 30 years and less than a year. So, and some of them I met like on the trip for the first time ever and wasn't ever had talked to them. So it was a real mishmash of relationships, length of relationships. And it was really just really great for me to experience like, wow, I know a lot of people in a lot of different places from various walks of life, and I know them from various different contexts in my life, and they've all been key people, even the ones I've barely known at all, on my personal journey. So it was just a really beautiful experience for me to have with just people, with these women in specific, but also others around, people I stayed with that weren't part of the podcast per se. So yeah, it was just an extraordinary experience from that point of view alone. So the other thing to know is that I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 4 years between 2010 and 2014. At the time, I was still married. That marriage was in a very slow, painful downward spiral at the time. And we moved back east in 2014, and that marriage didn't fully unwind and end until 2020 during COVID. So that's been a long journey. So going back to Santa Fe as part of the Disco Ball tour, there was an opportunity to revisit some of that story for me. So while I didn't set out on this tour to like have a personal growth experience or to find something new or to like go on a self-discovery tour, I feel like I've done a lot of that. I did a lot of that work after my divorce, leading up to doing this Disco Ball tour. Like that's all the story that got me to be able to even do something like this. But of course, inevitably, stuff came up, and yeah, it's part of the list I made here that I'm going to go over real quick. But um, some of those themes, some of the things that came up, some of what mile markers for me along that trip and since that trip are things and topics and areas I want to explore further in future episodes of the podcast. So, again, more about that at the end. But for now, I just want to quickly bop along here and share my key takeaways from those 30 days. The biggest thing is that I mean, this is true whether I was on the road or not, but anytime I sit down with someone to record an episode of the podcast, I hear the thing I need to hear and I learn something that I need to know. Or it brings something up in me that I get to now explore. So, or I can see, oh, yeah, like that's another way of looking at something that I've been working on. So, either way, I get huge benefits from other people sharing with me in the moment as I'm listening back, as I'm editing. So, and I always get to re listen to it at a time when I really need to hear that again and I can hear it differently. So, my hope is, of course, that people listening to the podcast are hearing something they need to hear. But I'm so thrilled by the whole way this works that when we share with each other and we share our stories with each other, you know, I get the benefit of sharing it and with someone else and talking it through or talking it out. But I also get so much more even from hearing other people share their experience. It just opens up new gateways of ways of seeing things for me. So it's a beautiful like circular thing. It's a give and a take. It's not just a giving or a taking. It's both happening simultaneously. So I'm really grateful to everyone who joins me, who participates in any way, who listens, comments, sidebars me, whatever. Like I just appreciate that because it brings me great joy. So anyway, I'm just gonna I don't know. Oh, all right. I'm gonna hammer this out real quick because I was like, oh, I'm already at 12 minutes. Holy smokes! All right. So the first thing I realized was agency. I haven't in certain situations for sure more than maybe someone else in terms of like financially for example, and that came up really clearly at the very start. My first night on the road, I stayed in a place in Bristol, Virginia that felt unsafe, and I had this epiphany like I can leave, and so I did. But the interesting thing that I realized after the fact was, there were people there who couldn't leave, who were financially not in a position to just get up and make a different decision for themselves and felt stuck there. So it was a real reminder to me, like I do have when I in those places where I do have agency, it's important that I use it, not just for my own benefit, but also to be an example of using your agency. So, and that kind of dovetailed nicely into my conversations in Nashville, the next stop, where I had two different conversations with two women who, by the way, didn't know each other but are now friends who ended up discovering each other in a place where they both do work. So pretty cool. And they're like, "Hey, wait, you know Hella? Yeah, I know Hella." So anyway, it was this great, beautiful moment. Like, "Oh, I just shared my story on the podcast. Oh, so did I." Beautiful. It's everything I hope for this podcast. So, in any case, the topics with those two conversations were the big thing was like, okay, movement is great, but rest is really important. And I don't have to endure painful things. I can push through them, but I don't have to endure. Like I can get up and go. I can leave. I can use my agency. Um, so that was Nashville. Then I got to Memphis, where I met with a woman I was just introduced to the night before we recorded by phone. So, and she was a hoot. And we talked about, she was like, listen, relax and have fun. And I'm like, you're right. If I'm doing all of this, I might as well have fun. So that was great. And then I moved on to Dallas, where I stayed for a couple of nights with my mentor. And that was really wonderful. And a lot of fear was coming up for me at this point because I was just like, what am I doing? I'm not qualified. What was I thinking? This is a terrible idea. I suck at this. And so she reminded me of a tool that she often has me use, which is the God box. So that's just like write down the fear you have, date it, and then fold it up, put it in a box. That's your God box. And set it aside and come back to it, check on it later and see if maybe it changed or it shifted. So, so yeah, that really helped me set aside my fears of not being enough, not good enough, not enough, not enough, not enough. And on my way from Dallas to Santa Fe, I stopped first in Justin, Texas, where I chatted with someone who uh, really introduced this overarching idea of shame. The way she said it was at one point in her life, she was shame. And I was like, wow, never heard it put quite like that, but I so understand what that means. And she was like, I was a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. And she's like, now I'm a 12 plus. I'm like, you know what? I like that. I'm going to take that. So, um, and then, um, oh, the other thing I got in Dallas with someone else I recorded with was be ready. Like get ready because the thing that's coming is coming. So just get ready now and do the work now on yourself for yourself because then you'll be ready when it shows up. So um, uh, in Amarillo, I stopped for the night on my way to from Dallas to Santa Fe, and there it was all about. From what came up for me was this whole thing about shame was still bopping around in my head, and it was all about like, what do you want? What do you want for your life? What do you want for love? What do you want in your livelihood? Like, what do you want? And unshame that. Why are you standing in the way of it? And I'm not sure that I have all the answers to all of that right now, but I have real clarity about what I want in all of those key areas of my life. And I have some ideas about why I stand in the way of it, fear. But also just there's more nuance than just fear, but that's a big one. So that's what I'm actually in the process of really unpacking and letting go of right now. So more about that, I'm sure, as the year goes on. So then I get to Santa Fe, and I spent a week in Santa Fe, mainly because I had lived there for a while. It was important to me to reconnect with people there that I hadn't really spoken to since I moved away in 2014, so 12 years ago now. And there was some repair that I felt I wanted and needed to do. So, primarily by just being present and spending time and listening and giving, by just leaving space. But some things that came up for me there, one was I revisited all the places I lived there. There's more about that in the docu-series. Um, at the time, I didn't feel any major upheavals around it. I did when I got home. So that was interesting. Um, but in any case, I realized there just by spending time with people I know there, that, even when I was at my worst, because at that time I really was at my worst, I had something to offer. Like a few people said to me, "Oh, you said this thing to me at the time when when you lived here that really stuck with me, and I still think about it today, and it really helped me then, and it still helps me now." And I was like, "What?" Um, okay. So it was just a really great reminder to me, or a highlight to me, that yeah, I may feel at my worst, but I'm still have value, of course, but I have value and I have something to offer, whether it's all buttoned up and packaged or not. And most usually, actually, in my experience now, I would say the less buttoned up I am, the more I have to offer, quite frankly. So perfection is not the what it's cracked up to be, and it's not only is it unattainable, it's actually not relatable. So just be yourself, be where you are. You have something to offer, no matter what. Um, and the other thing was I was staying with my work parents. I worked with them for almost 3 years when I lived there, and so I call them my work parents. They really are like parents to me. And at the time when I lived there still and worked for them, they saw something in me. They saw a spark in me. They saw, again, at my worst time, they saw something inside of me, and they said as much at the time. And they're just really good about that. And it always stuck with me. And because they said that and it stuck back here, I couldn't access it for a long time and I couldn't believe them, but it was in here. So years later, as I was embarking on all of these changes and the podcast and the writing and like their belief in me and saying what they saw in me at all those years ago came to the forefront and really helped me have the courage to do it. So just saying, if you see it in someone, say it, because you just never know. They may never tell you about it, but you may never know what the impact in a positive way might be. The other thing that came up in my conversations in Santa Fe was pleasure, as the pleasure of pain or of suffering, like shutting down. Like there's actually some pleasure in that. Like, and so it can be hard to let go of, or be in the pleasure of joy. Um, and yeah, I there was also some women there that shared with me stories they'd never shared with really many people, if any at all. And so that was, really important about using your voice and sharing and having a place to share and being given the opportunity to share. So that was great. Then I drove from Santa Fe to Denver. And during that drive, I met a barista along the way at a coffee shop on the road. And we talked about people are rays of sunshine. And so it's really important to be with each other, person to person, because there's so much sunshine in the world. Um, and during that drive, I got in touch with, I don't, I can ground into my pelvis, into my core, not just my feet. And then I felt my heart and my pelvis connected. It was so crazy. I was like, I've never experienced that before. So whatever was happening for me and whatever closure I had made while in Santa Fe, it really opened up a whole new possibility. And coincidentally or not, my drive to Denver really was the last stretch that I had ever done versions of that drive with my ex. So when I turned east through the mountains towards Denver from the valley between the mountains, it was the first time I was on a new stretch of road that I was traveling for the first time, really. And yeah, so it felt significant. Like, okay, I've closed off my Santa Fe time, years, that part of the story, and now I'm moving into a new story of my the next chapter of my life. So that was pretty cool. Then I was in Nebraska by a lake surrounded by cornfields. What? And there, this whole thing of home was really resonating. I mean, I'm sort of heading home at this point. But what is home now? I mean, this whole experience had altered my whole understanding of what is home. So lots of conversations about what is home and a whole podcast episode about it. Then I got to Chicago, and Chicago was a combination of I was also in between in Des Moines and caught up with someone I hadn't seen in like decades and bopped around Des Moines, and we talked a lot about grief, which is another recurring theme of different kinds of grief. And just for her, like moving through grief, like literally moving your body and walking. But Chicago was all about, for me, restoring and like recovering because I was exhausted by this point. It's the beginning of the last week. And so my conversations there were about spiritual connectedness, but also about money. So I had a whole conversation with Anita Knotts, who used to work as a financial advisor. Now she coaches women in financial services. So she does a lot of work with them on, their own journeys, their careers, but also money and the relationship to money and, making money. So that really brought up a big can of worms. So that's a big one for me, for sure, and an ongoing struggle. So she also said the same thing about, seeing the spark in someone and calling it out. And we kind of wrapped it up into if not now, when, and if not me, who. So yeah. Then I get to Detroit, almost towards the end here. Get to Detroit and spend a few nights with my good friend Shara Nova, who we go way back to the early days of New York, and she's a musician, a composer, a performer, just an all-around creative genius. And we were doing a lot of that creativity in community way back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s in New York. So that was a beautiful revisiting. And so lots of talk about creativity. Again, money in art, money as part of career, money in relationships, how to talk about it. So money was a big one. And then I ended in Cleveland with another really great friend. We talked about postpartum depression, and in that conversation, actually, that episode was a bit of a wrap up of all the conversations, because in our conversation, lots of the recurring themes came up. So that was pretty great. And yeah, so that was really the Discoball tour in a nutshell. And I wrote about this on my Substack, but I don't feel like I'm different, but I do feel changed as a result of having done that. And I also feel expanded and more grounded. So it's like this, like I'm more expanded, but I'm also more grounded. So, and now that I also have this sense memory of being connected and grounded in my pelvic core, not just my feet. I'm like, I recognize like, oh, I couldn't sustain that. I'd sort of detached from it. And I'm like, oh, I want to revisit that. So this year. Um, so I guess, that takes me to like, what's next? Well, I'm going to pivot the podcast to a different release schedule, which means I'm going to go to every other week release schedule. Now that all the Discoball tour episodes are out, I'm going to slow this whole thing down and create some more space for myself to maintain, to sort of focus it a bit more, but also to just create more space around it. Um, and yeah, that's basically what it boils down to, and give myself more space to really, fine tune it, and alongside the other things that I do. So I'm going to go to an every other week release schedule for the podcast. I'm not going to be doing video only or always video, but maybe occasionally. I'm going to wrap up the Discoball Tour docu-series, which I did, all the footage I filmed behind the scenes or of me doing this whole endeavor in real time. But that's been a big project and way more than I realized when I started it. Because, like I said, I just dive in and then figure it out. So that was a lot. Not sure I'm going to do a lot of that again anytime soon without a better plan for it now that I know. But I'm going to wrap that docu series up by the end of April. So check out my YouTube at Hellerator for that. You can see all the episodes I've already put up there. Um, I may extend it and like have because I did some filming of things like as I was processing all of this when I got home. So maybe not, but not anytime soon. And then I'm going to really focus the podcast on some of the themes that came up during the Disco Ball tour that I've touched on here and deep dive a little bit more into them. Shame for sure and unshaming my wants and desires, like just more about shame. I have someone I'm going to invite to talk about shame. She does a lot of work with shame and works with others on their shame. So pleasure and grounding, I want to talk more about that, deep dive a little bit more into those concepts and ideas. Expansion, like how do we expand? What's sustainable when we expand? Like what is that? What's the process of that? Which kind of goes with creativity and creative process, whether you're an artist or not. That experience of expansion and contraction is very much the creative process I have found. So, but it's not unique to artists or creatives. I think that's just the human condition. So, I want to deep dive a little bit more into those areas. Money. Uh, Definitely want to talk more about money and the different tentacles that extend out for money that it touches and brings up in people. Like for me, I got a tax bill just the other day, and ever since my right shoulder has been locking up, and that's not the menopause. Like that's a direct like fear response, and my shoulder has just been like so. Something to work on for sure. So I want to deep dive a little bit more into this whole money writ large, money in relationships, money in life, money for women, uh, all of it, like more about that. And then, of course, ongoing women's health, community, because community was such a big underpinning of everything, women's health. Every woman's story had some element of physical something or other and health. So in April, I am going to have two episodes. The two episodes are going to be me talking to women who work in women's health with a focus on specifically menopause, ADHD, or just sexual wellness in general. And endometriosis is part of that. And yeah, so we're going to get into that a little bit. And I want to just keep exploring that throughout the year. And then, um, yeah, I think that's like sort of the main big topics I want to deep dive into a bit more. And um, I think that's really it. Yeah, so that's what's next for this space, for the podcast space. And yeah, I'm just really excited about where I'm at and sitting with sort of and letting sink in all of this that I took away from being on the Disco Ball tour and in the months since. There's a lot more to unpack that's happened that I'm not quite ready to talk about, but I do get into on my Substack in my writing, so you can check that out. And yeah, I just in general at the moment feel liberated, like from my own self, like that whole what's why are you standing in the way of it, or what's this about? Like I've been standing a bit in my own way. I've been very concerned about what other people think or how I should do this or how I should do that. And so it's been a real evolution for me this year alone, 2026, I think off the back of the Disco Ball tour of really owning what I know and doing it not my way because it's the way it just trusting my own gut and asking for help when I need it, but then trusting my own voice and my own knowing as to how to proceed next. I'm really excited to see where this next year uh, takes me and how the rest of this year plays out and how this podcast continues to evolve. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. And let's see what's next together. Woohoo! All righty. Mwah.
So now that we got all that out of the way and a full recap, you can watch the whole docu-series on my YouTube channel at Hellarator and see more of the story there, and look out for new videos at some point down the road. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, listen, all the things. And check out my Instagram at Hellarator. Lots of stuff going on, y'all. So I hope you come hang and help support my mission to get more women's stories out there and get more of their voices amplified. So, all right, y'all, be safe and stay warm-ish, or maybe stay cool, depending on where you are. Either way, stay safe. Mwah. Stories That Sparkle podcast, now out wherever you get your podcasts.